So the other day I made a video talking about Ordeal Call 2 finally coming out, and then I kind of talked about the banner that came out alongside that to kind of get us ready for Ordeal Call 2, bringing all the Ordeal Call 1 servants back, and I didn't really feel like I made a proper argument for why someone would maybe want to actually summon for Durga or Saber Medusa. And then I more made the argument of, well, you should probably save because you want to be cautious. What if we actually do get a new White Day servant? What if we get a ton of really good guys for Ordeal Call 2? What if they're really strong servants? But I feel like that's kind of disingenuous for me to say because Durga has been a very, very powerful asset in my JP account, especially as someone who plays more low to the ground. You guys will notice I don't really summon on every single banner on JP. I can't really afford to because if I'm going to spend any money on the game to kind of refill my quartz stocks, I'm going to do that on the NA version. I consider that my main account. So JP, not only is it kind of a hassle to pay for things, it's not my main account. So if I don't pull a unit, it's not the end of the world. I'll still find a way to get by. That being said, a lot of the units on my account over on JP are NP1. So I play very low to the ground, and I feel like I have more of a free-to-play-ish type of experience having to use a lot of NP1 servants. And Durga has been a tremendous help. For the Tolmaeus event, the 90++ on that, I was able to actually get some good consistent runs in that node because of Durga herself. And so thinking about that, and then thinking about all the slander that Durga gets, I mean, she's not a perfect unit. She's not the most broken unit to ever come out in FGO, but for her to kind of get the slander that she does, I think is a bit odd to me because of how good she is as a unit. But, then again, maybe some people will look at her kit and think she's way, way better than she is, which, they might be like, oh, she's like a double EX tier unit. But in reality, she's probably a solid A+, but an A+ that's worth considering. But you guys also know that I'm very fair, even when talking about someone like Melusine, who is probably one of my more used servants because of how good she is and how just kind of generic she is to just throw at different stages. I even have some problems with her that I was able to find. There's little faults that when you use a unit, especially for someone like Melusine, who you have also had on JP for 2 years, you can eventually find faults in a unit. And using Durga since she came out, there are some instances that I will actually show in this video where Durga doesn't do quite the best. I think it's good to show what a servant can do at times, but I also think it's good to show people that are considering to summon on banners what servants cannot do at times. And for instance, at the end of the video, I'm going to be talking about Durga trying to do neutral farming, where she does not do a very good job, right? It's kind of hard for her to do, especially if she doesn't have a power mod. But I guess one of the biggest concerns, just jumping right out of the gate, that a lot of people are probably going to have about Durga is, well, she's an arts AoE unit with only 0.3% NP gain, and that's something that, say, Ruler Moriarty has, and he's also known to kind of have a rough time farming. I mean, he can do it, but if you're summoning for an AoE unit, you probably want to use him for farming. Durga has very strong applications, I think, going into CQ content. Well, maybe not super strong, let me dial that back a little bit, but good applications in CQ style content, because she does have some very good things in her kit that allow her to perform decently well, especially if you take using Castoria as your main support into account. That definitely helps patch up some defensive holes that she might have. But the 0.3 NP gain is perfectly fine because they gave her 8 hits on an AoE NP, so she's actually getting a lot of overkill, especially against, power mod enemies. You get those first 3 hits in and then maybe the enemy dies, and 4 through 8, you are absolutely loading up on NP gain, especially because she has more arts than you might think. People will look at the second skill and probably say, well, it's a 20% Omni card buff, but not look at her passive skills where she has a passive 10% arts buff, and I guess also a 10% quick buff, guys. She does have double quick cards, so if you want to consider that, I suppose. But that's also, something that's a little bit better that's probably not being considered. Having that extra 10% in the passive does give her a solid enough 30% arts buff that is not only increasing her damage, but is also increasing the NP gain on those arts cards. And then worst case scenario, you also have a 50% battery, which, I mean, say it with me now, are 50% batteries good? Yeah, they're absolutely phenomenal. Pretty much any relevant servant that wants to be an AoE looper in any capacity needs to be rocking a 50% battery at baseline at this point, because if you have a 30%, you could probably still be really good, like say with Ushigozen, but people are probably not going to give you the time of day, even though I also think Ushigozen gets a little bit rougher than she probably should, but that's a whole different video for another day. The 50% is very strong, as well as also overcharging the entire party's NP stage by 1, I think is very strong, considering that all of the art supports have very strong overcharge effects. You know, with Castoria, you're getting extra solemn defense hits. With Tamamo, you're getting extra NP. With Lady Avalon or Proto Merlin, whatever you want to call her, with her, you're going to be getting extra stars. It synergizes really well, as opposed to, say, you know, if you were buffing, I don't know, like Ruler Scotty's overcharged stages, it wouldn't be as impactful, because in arts teams, you're firing your NPs all the time because you're consistently doing arch chains. So when you're buffing up the power of your support's NPs, you really feel it, as opposed to, say, a quick comp where you're predominantly doing quick chains, so you're not as often finding, you know, your Scotty's NPs, which I think is a whole discussion for another day, of like, maybe just give Scotty like a self 50% battery so she can find that NP a little bit easier. I mean, it worked really well for Caskill for the few times, you know, that I've brought him out to use him. He feels a lot better because he can get it more consistently. So, you know, maybe help out Scotty in the same vein, or maybe whatever the next quick support unit ends up being. But again, we're trailing off of Durga. So anyways, very, very strong effect that she has. The invincibility as well is also very strong, because I have found myself in some scenarios where sometimes I want to pass the arts buff off to one of my other Castorias or my Merlins, because I really need, say, that Merlin to survive that extra turn to really start getting that NP flowing again, or maybe I would need him to keep refunding stars for me, or one of the other Castorias is about to get all of her skills off of their cooldown, and so I need her to live. So sometimes you want to pass that over to them, and that's perfectly fine. So her having 3 hits of invincibility for 3 turns is very, very useful, because not only does that pretty much guarantee you for a turn, because if they really just focus down on Durga and they attack her 3 times, it did the job of a normal invincibility, but usually you're going to get the full effect out of that. Like, they might attack her once on turn 1, once on turn 3, once on turn 2, you know, something along those lines, or maybe twice on turn 2 and then once on turn 3, you know, whatever combo you want to make up, they might do something along those lines. But one of the things that I also really like about Durga is the fact that she's rocking the Pierce Invincibility, because again, as someone who's playing a bit more low to the ground on JP, having a Pierce Invincibility skill on a servant is just very, very useful, being able to get around dodges and invulns, especially in these weird whack challenge quests that they be making nowadays, or these weird Bleach Earth quests that they're doing. Just being able to get around that entirely is super nice. The NP damage buff, I would say, is like really impactful because of Oberon, because it's 30%, it's really high, but I don't have Oberon, so I haven't been able to do like insane nuking with Durga. But you know, obviously big NP damage plus Oberon plus Black Grail, if you have it, is going to make her do awooga numbers. But finally, the changing her command cards to arts for a turn is really nice, because there have been times that I have brought Durga to challenge quests, because again, she has the Sky Attribute power mod, she has the Demonic power mod, and so sometimes I can bring her to, you know, do a job of a single target, especially because considering Sky Attribute is not the most common power mod that you can find on your servants. You know, it's not a super large category, but there's very few servants that can actually do that job for you. And they're all limited servants, I believe. You know, it's what, Nero Bride, Tesla, Raiko, Mao Nobu, Okita Alter, and Voyager as of his most recent buff. So you don't exactly have abundant options there. I mean, you're better off, I suppose, if you have a Nero Bride, because Nero Bride can dump the buff onto anybody, but it's very nice that she does have it, right? And so if I bring her to those, and I really want to guarantee that she has a follow-up NP, because an AoE NP on a single target, you're probably not going to loop it all back. The fact that I could just take some jumbled cards, you know, I could do a Mighty Chain, or I could guarantee do an Arch Chain, which is really nice. It could also help me guarantee that I'm getting Castoria's cards in there as well. You know, if one of them is at 80%, I could throw one of them in there, help me refund my own NP on the face card that follows up on my own NP, but help secure me later on in the fight, because I've now given my Castoria the chance to build up her NP as well, and that, you know, we all know how good Castoria's NP is. It just does a billion things that are all really good. She's also nice in some of those weird challenge quests because of her ability to reduce their defense by 20%, and that stacks for 3 turns, so you'll slowly start doing more and more damage with your NPs, which I do find to be a little nice. And again, I mean, the Sky Attribute, like I mentioned, just having that, even though it's not Earth, it's not Man, it's not the craziest thing ever, you know, you're not going to see it all the time, it's still nice to have, right? It's still a very nice thing, because when you do need it, it's nice to just have that be available to you. You know, same thing for the Demonic thing. At least that's a little bit more common, I would say. You probably find that in more free quests, especially, you know, stuff like Lost Belt 4, where all the creatures are demonic, so in certain story chapters, it might just be completely popping off. But I will say, in one of the last videos I should have shown of me just kind of taking Durga to some random stages, was just bringing her, and this is unironically the caster daily, which she was not able to get done, which again, my Durga is NP1, but I was kind of glad to be able to show this because I do still have a level 40 Black Grill, at least on JP, you know, again, not the max limit broken, max leveled one I have on NA where we can make people do awooga numbers, but still, it's a pretty significant boost. It's still pretty strong. It gives you a decent chunk of attack as well, and she was not able to take Sanzo down, and not even close, not even after the second NP. I know all of her buffs wore off, but yeah, it is a little iffy if you're going to start bringing her neutral against like no sky or demonic people. It kind of reminds me a bit of Morgan, but at least Morgan's a berserker, so there's a little bit more leeway in there, and at least for Buster guys, you loop their skills back so you can still get the defense down on, say, waves 2 and 3, so that's kind of nice. But for Durga, it can be a little bit rough. I mean, she's not going to be your go-to to every single stage, which is why I was saying she can't be like this double EX tier unit, because, well, at that point, you got to be able to do like all the stages with like very few flaws, and that's definitely a flaw for Durga. There's also the fact that I don't like that the Pierce Invult is only 1 turn. Love that the NP damage is 3 turns, works really, really well with Oberon, helps her out with farming and stuff, but I really wish that Pierce Invul was also 3 turns, because that's just a very convenient thing to have. But yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts on Durga as a servant after using her over the past year. And I know people like to just get my real thoughts on some of these servants that are not just, oh, here's what the servant does, you know, here's like kind of a guide. This is more my experience, you know, of using this servant and kind of how they actually perform based on at least my time playing the game. But with that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you are going to be summoning on the Durga banner over on JP, I think it's perfectly fine to do so. It's just I myself am a little bit more cautious. Like if I didn't have her, I probably would end up skipping because I want to see what's coming out for Ordeal Call 2. Usually new story chapters bring us some really banger servants, but then again, sometimes you get not so banger servants. I'm not going to call out any specific lost builds, but they know who they are. With that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace. Late, guys.